Hello, everybody. A quick question or a quick step into the subject. One of the leads which I retained from Frédéric's presentation was that teleworking required a climate of trust. He drew that mainly to psychological safety, but let me extend also on technological and process safety. Obviously, because I mean, the humans are one part, the technology to link them to the office is another part. What would you say, obviously a stone in the pond, what would you say from your various perspectives, madam, gentlemen, is the most important one? And where do we have still to make eventually improvements? So, who is the first one? David. We are not hearing you yet.
Okay.
Now we hear you.
Okay, fine. Yes, I think that if I would start, I would say that technological is, of course, important because you need first to solve this, and this can be solved more easily because you know what you have to put in place if you want at least to be safe. And almost I said that with the first and the second phase of confinement that we had, and a lot of people all working teleworking, made that the IT side might be solved at least today after 1.5 years almost. So on my side, I would say that of course you need to use what your employers is giving you and not to use your own PC. I mean, this is the first step to be sure that you have no more viruses that you might need, I mean, in the sense of having something which is secured by your institution and not by yourself. This is a basic. Of course, people in these institutions need to know how to do this, to put certificate on it, to have two-factor authentication, this kind of stuff, to be sure that you are the one who are connecting to the for teleworking also. But this is the most easiest part because then you have the problem of the environment and you have the point of the people, which are the weakest part when you leave the place and you forget to have at least to disconnect or at least to have the screensaver starting and blocking the PC or the laptop and this kind of thing. So on my side, I think that technologically you can protect a lot. You can not protect everything, but you need also to teach people what not to do in an environment which is not safe anymore. Even if it's not in an hotel or it's not in a public place, you need to take care from your environment, from your children, from everybody you can visit, and be able to disconnect on time, even if you leave for 10 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes, to be sure that nobody can use the PC at the time being. I think this is one important point.
Nico, any further thoughts on that one?
Well, people, technology, process, right? That's indeed, you will not solve anything with or everything with technology. But we have also seen in the early beginning of COVID, basically the opposite. What David is telling is that when companies were in firefighting mode, that they said, okay, if you don't have a PC, just take a PC from home. And then you have to build your defense around it. And that's basically what we call zero trust. So you don't trust anything. The only assumption you make is that sooner or later probably something will happen. So you have to build your defense like that. Keep the hackers out, and if they are in, make sure that you're equipped to detect them as soon as possible. So we have seen indeed a lot of companies in firefighting mode in the beginning. Now we are 18 months later, and you see that everyone is getting more and more mature when it comes to homework. But it's very true that next to technology, it's also about learning and educating your people that on how they should deal with suspicious information, for instance, how they can recognize a phishing email. And then about processes. We have seen customers that they're just approving budgets based on a phishing email. Well, there you should have a process that you should have a kind of double check somewhere that before you start doing stuff like that.
Yeah, basically, I mean, I forgot to present my alter ego here, or Stettler, as we tend to call him. I'm Waldorf. That's why I every once in a while show that little picture with the two old guys from the Muppet Show. Basically, Koen Maris, who is partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Luxembourg, and the king of the road on cybersecurity in that house. So basically what you're alluding to is a question which we discussed yesterday, Koen and myself. The question basically is, where does the LAN stop to a certain extent? To put it bluntly, because you say, well, wherever, even if you are in a firefighting mode, Nico, we need to work with what is available before we can get everything into the working mode. And David on the other side says, well, better make sure that we have the barriers, so to speak, at the right place before we tell people stay at home and don't come into the office.
No, just if I can correct something, I would say that when you're firefighting, of course, you need to do first a job. And this is also, Catherine Mullers can explain that it was a choice of the system to say first, the business you should continue. But now we are 1 year later. And I mean, 1 year later, I think you cannot continue to work without being protected. And the protected is not only about zero trust on the institution side, because it's very difficult if you don't have the power to react on the laptop side if it's not the one from the bank, including for the legal point of view, because you cannot do what you want on the laptop side if it's not a laptop of the institution. I think that 1 year later or more, as we are today, we should take into consideration not to use a specific laptop from the people. I mean, it must come from the institutions. I agree, but we are not more in a firefighting mode. And we are talking about the teleworking.
I agree with you. I agree with you, David. Excuse me to interrupt you. I agree with you, but just one element which I would like to put on the table to all of you. Yes, we are in a pandemic, and it was that pandemic which, strangely enough, taught us that there was something called teleworking, because we have in Luxembourg no tradition whatsoever as regards teleworking, while other countries all around Scandinavia has done it. I've lived it 10 years ago at KPN in the Netherlands, etc., etc. So we have basically no tradition. So let's not maybe, during our discussion, tie it all to the pandemic. Let's maybe also keep in mind that teleworking can be an opportunity, can help us on a number of issues like carbon footprint, etc., etc., etc. So I'm absolutely with you, David, with what you're saying, but let's maybe also keep a broader view on teleworking as such, and not necessarily tie it to the pandemic, although it was the pandemic kicking it off in Luxembourg. No.
I suggest we ask Catherine what she thinks.
Absolutely, I was going because you basically opened an avenue to the only lady on the board. So, Catherine, the floor is yours. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. So yeah, on our side, I can also confirm that what we saw was, of course, when the pandemic started, all of this, there was the need to react quickly, which was also what David was saying. What we did and straight away was saying, okay, first you need to make sure that the business can keep running, and that's paramount. That's the first goal. And at the same time, it was also really important for us to say, okay, but keeping the business running is really important, and try and do on a best effort basis secure already your channels into your company, because this is your weak point. As soon as you start opening to other uncontrolled devices, then you're opening up ports and risking your internal infrastructure. So of course, then what we have seen as well is that entities came to see us and said, okay, we need to start one way or another now because of this pandemic, but we're going to gradually move to secure as well. Further and further. But what I would just wanted to say with all of this is, because you're very much also focused on this human aspect point, I think this is something that was also something really important, which we've been also focusing on, is that once you have a pandemic like the one we had, or let's say more trigger points where social engineering comes into play, the rise in these kind of social engineering attacks, where people have been sending phishing, etc., has been really exponential. And I think there's still a lot of need on the side of the entities to continue training, to find these points where actually your employees or your clients are vulnerable to expose your infrastructure due to making certain manipulations that they shouldn't be doing because they find themselves in a stressful situation or whatever. So there's two sides to it. First of all, there's preventing getting somebody into the network, but then there's also detecting what is already there. And we know that even before the pandemic, you have always had the risk that somebody could get into your network and you might not even be able to detect them for a very, very long time. So these sides also need to be strengthened. And I think there's been work that's been done even already pre-pandemic, and it certainly needs to continue in the future as well. So I think there's a lot of aspects that we need to continue to work on. Cyber is on the agenda of everyone. We're getting more and more interconnected. We're going to continue with teleworking and home working for various reasons. But I think this personal human aspect is also really important to consider.
Yeah. Absolutely. Alain, can I just toss the ball over to you in this context? Did you see at CNPD when companies were putting into place these new procedures, these new processes, extending the security perimeter beyond the office building? I'm oversimplifying, apologies for that. But did you see increasing numbers of requests coming to CNPD as to how to handle all this from the data side and the data safety and the personal data safety side?
Yes, hello, thank you. No, we didn't see it. We even saw at the beginning of the pandemic, when all people started to go teleworking, we even saw, let's say, a drop of the notifications of data breaches. And even after a certain period, let's say that these notifications came to the same level as before, but they were not specifically linked to the teleworking environment. And I think it's also mainly linked because, well, people were not ready to detect incidents in the context of teleworking. I think we saw that was a kind of disorganization, general disorganization during that period. And also, I think many people, when we look at it from data protection point of view, do not necessarily know that they are breaching or that they have a security incidents in that context. So yeah, I cannot say that there was a wave of problems or wave of questions or whatever linked to this factor for
okay.
our case.
Yes, but one could imagine that. I mean, as soon as I have somebody, for example, logging in from the outside onto my service, to keep a very, very simple and very blunt example, obviously, well, I know that there is somebody behind that machine. Obviously, I can start monitoring the person remotely. So the question is, what is the level of information I can draw from such logs? To what extent can I use them to control, quote unquote, my employees remotely, etc., etc. There's a number of obviously of concerns which I know you address at the CNPD and which are more or less clear as regards the law and as regards your instructions and your work papers, etc. But one could imagine that things like that pop up and that some employers have questions or tabled questions to that extent with you.
Yeah, for that domain, of course, but that's another question. So this is monitoring of employee. But firstly, you have two kinds of monitoring to consider. The first kind of monitoring is linked to the security of your data, the security of your infrastructure, which is something that can be, of course, set up even in context of GDPR by the companies. And you have the monitoring of the employee. But for those latter elements, we do not necessarily know what's going on in the field because with GDPR, we do no more give any authorization in that context. So we also didn't see any raise in that area, and also we didn't receive, let's say, more complaints than usual for that kind of elements.
Okay.
So from our point of view, what happened also with monitoring of people, monitoring of systems in this teleworking environment, there was no wave of problems of, let's say, problems that we received.
Okay, but we heard already a few words, trust, control, monitoring. Trust is good, of course, control is better, some will say. Where others say zero trust is even better. I leave it up to you to choose, but when I do monitoring today, the monitoring changed. If I look back in the last 10 years, and as Catherine explained, we were more focused on perimeter monitoring than on endpoint monitoring, whereas if we are going to do home working and on a large scale as we are doing and continue to do, combined with cloud computing, we are almost obliged from a security perspective to monitor an endpoint or a device which indirectly will also monitor the employee, and that will become a difficult point to discuss either with CNPD or with the unions or whomever is protecting the interest of the employee, of course. And that's a good right, but we need to find a right balance, and I didn't find it yet. And I think here Frédéric has perhaps something to say as a HR person, and we come back to you, Alain, later on this topic.
Well, of course, at the end of the game, it's always a human being that will take the decision or not. I would say it's important that they have the awareness, and that as an organization we trust them. It doesn't mean that if we trust them, we don't have a look at what they are doing and we don't monitor globally. And that's all about the balance, as you said, and which is really difficult to get. But at the very first time, we have to put in place technical infrastructures, and as an organization and as an employee, we can trust. And then afterwards, as a manager, I have to trust my employees regarding all the things they do, and that's the point. But outside the organization, we really have to care about it and to really monitor, and much more about the technical part of the things. Inside, we must include I would say the human factor, and if we include it, if we pay attention to it, if we trust it, then you will get benefits of it. If you don't give any clue about risk, if you don't train them, if you don't trust them, you won't get back information. You won't be able to enhance your infrastructure, enhance your way of working, improve all these things. And we also have to pay attention as HR that we all together, all the employees work and deliver outputs. And this is also something important, and we have to take into account.
Maybe a question, if I can, to Frédéric.
Yeah.
When you're talking about trust, it means that we are not talking about the same trust, because you're talking about the trust of people not doing something against the institution or the bank in your case. But I think that Koen is talking about the trust of the system. We are lucky because today I don't know any case of data leakage related to an employee, which might not be the employee, which might be a hacker using the employee's laptop. Mm-hmm. And then you need an investigation to see where was the trust lost. Was it in the laptop, which is a technical one, or was it in the employee who is the hacker in such?
Yeah, but above that, I would say to go a step further and regarding the productivity of all the employees, and that's
a trust.
But you're right, David. There are two different things we call trust in that.
Exactly.
Topic.
But if I combine the data in a right way, from a security perspective, it would look wrong in the eyes of CNPD and in compliance with GDPR, and that will be the difficulty of the future, I suppose. But I see Alain is eager to answer something here. So Alain, go ahead.
I would say, yeah, you need to take care. But when you are setting up security and the purpose of this processing is security of your goods, you need to stick to this purpose. So yes, with the data that you gather, you may be able to have some other information about individuals, about to which website they connect, so on. But these are elements you need to consider when you set up your security monitor, and not to use those information, but to use the information for the security purpose.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why it's a question of proportionality. It's something that, of course, needs to be raised up, but GDPR doesn't prevent from doing this.
No, of course not.
So it's just more thinking about it, about how to set this up to be the less privacy intrusive as possible, but you can do it. And you need to do it because you have to ensure the security of the data, at least of the personal data, from a legal point of view.
That's the entire debate around meta, but we will not conduct that debate here because that's another forum.
Maybe another question, and yeah, we already said homeworking might stay. We have been discussing in the past days other topics, and one of them was, of course, yesterday with the FBI incident response. I've been involved in a lot of incident response cases, and I can say that there is definitely an increase on insider threat. So where there is a disgruntled employee doing something he or she shouldn't. But what if we are homeworking? How can I get my materials back? And that's perhaps another HR, and I'm pretty sure David has an opinion on that as well.
Catherine probably also.
How can I get the laptop back in my premises? Because this is a company laptop sitting at somebody's home. Who might be a disgruntled employee. How can I get that laptop back, especially if we're cross-border like our country is?
I think next time we need a lawyer in the panel also to explain how far can we go by contract, because I suppose that you could at least explain by contract that you need to be able, on specific purpose, to access the laptop for investigation maybe. I don't know if it's legal or not, but at least in the contract, you might see these possibilities.
Yeah, I ask, of course, on purpose this question because I know the regulators are here and there have been circulars on home working and remote working and cloud and etc. And I know it's a problem, it's a legal problem. Maybe Frederick or maybe Nico has an answer, or even Alain from experience. I know it's not a black and white answer, so thank you again, David, for trying to answer it or taking a position. It's not easy.
What we are working out on at the moment, actually, and regarding the new CSSF circular on teleworking, is just to add a kind of addendum to the contract, and actually regarding all the teleworking, and we have a teleworking policy. And then we will ask all the employees that will be teleworking in the future, not during the pandemic, but in the future, that they will sign up a new kind of addendum in the contract saying that the laptop is the one of the bank or the organization anyway. And it belongs to the organization. And as request from the organization, they have to give it back.
Yeah.
Of course, if the employee is we get rid of him or her, then there's another issue, and we'll go to the court. But as for lots of other things, that's the contract, and you can follow the contract or not, and that's it. But it's the only way we found with our legal advices to how to deal with the new situation after the pandemic and complying with the new laws / regulations and circulars. Yeah.
So sounds like a fair answer, huh?
Yeah, Catherine, that's the ball. The ball is in your camp
Yes,
on the circular. So could you just give us a few insights? Do you see other ways of dealing with that other than those which Fabrice has outlined?
On our side, so this is actually a very interesting question. We have not been confronted to that question as such yet. But I would also think, and again, I'm not a lawyer either, so don't take this from a legal point of view. But from my personal point of view, I would also say that once you actually provide a company device to your employee, it still is the possession of the company. So I would take that point of view as well, that you could be able to recover it as it is your property. It's a company property item. But then going towards this entire discussion that we had just beforehand about using your own tools and like own devices for connecting, then this is actually where we're getting into this issue of saying, in that case, I actually maybe as a company don't have control over this device that is being used, and this is also one of the reasons why maybe using private devices should be more restricted and prohibited in that sense, apart from the fact that you can maybe not control them as well as you would like as a company.
But that's the complete discussion about bring your own devices. That's a big struggle in the market. Also there, as a technology vendor, we are investing a lot to monitor and to contain the data that is eventually ending up on the devices, and that you have a kind of control. And also insider risk. What are people doing with data of the company? Are they oversharing confidential data? Are they putting it on shadow IT platform? That kind of insight is really what the market needs. And that data can also be de-identified, so IT does not even see who is doing that, but then specific roles, legal roles within the company can then really do investigations and e-discovery, like we call it, to really start a case against an employee if needed. But I think, I can only talk I'm also not a lawyer, of course, but from a technology perspective, a lot of things are possible, even doing it on a secure way on personal own devices, right? Because that's a question that's popping up all the time. This is my personal device. I want to read my email on it, but no way you install an MDM agent on my device.
Yeah.
So that's a question that all companies are confronted with, but luckily there are solutions to do that.
Yeah, it's that. I mean, it even. I'm apologies again, Madam, Gentlemen. I'm for the very simple, very basic examples. The very simple, very basic example is I have my company laptop. I'm logged into the company network. I need to print something out because, again, apologies, but I'm really a paper guy. So I print something out, and voila, I'm for that printing. I'm connecting onto my home network on which I have my printer, which by chance or by mishap is connected to the supplier who does online maintenance via that way. So, I mean,
there you have, for instance, data loss prevention, like we call it. So if it's a corporate document, you're only allowed to print it on a corporate printer.
Yep.
That kind of policy you can set.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, on my side, I never saw in the financial sector, a bank or another financial institutions, allowing to use a local printer. Because by default, if you connect to the local printer, it should be not secure. And of course, they try to avoid the printing of everything and the data leakage. So I don't no cases at all today of a financial institution having allowed the printer at the employee side.
Alain, go ahead.
Maybe just to add also, there are also, if you consider the confidentiality of the document and you print it at home, so you lose control of this document from the company point of view. And then when you want to destroy this document, what do you do at home? Do you put it in your trash can? At your office, you may have a shredder. And also, I just want to come back maybe to the bring your own device or to use your own computer at home. This creates a lot of legal issues just alone with the GDPR. Because, well, firstly, you have the problem if you want to monitor the employees' activities or the security, there's going to be a mix between what's the company and what's private, and there this mix will be really big. You continue to monitor this device during the weekend outside of the working hours. And there is also a very huge risk of using, let's say, their own solutions or solutions that are downloaded from internet to put in their data from the company. And then the data are maybe located in India and so on. And this is also a legal issue. So I would really try to avoid as much as possible to use own computers for doing.
You make sure that the corporate data is ending up in a container on the bring your own device, on the device of the employee, right? That's the only piece you are controlling as a company. You don't care about all the rest, what the employee is doing on his device. But basically, you cannot see it, but you contain your corporate data. That's the thing.
Yeah, technically it is, of course. There are solutions for that. But I think Alain and David as well made a valid point there. Just to come back to Alain's remark, yeah, what you do with printed documents at home? Do you put them in the trash bin or not? Well, if you don't know what to ask for Santa Claus, who's coming up on 25th December, ask a shredder. It costs €50 and can save a lot of harm.
Yeah, or do winter barbecuing. That's also an idea. Just fire up your barbecue with the document.
Yeah, but our ESG policies do not allow that anymore. You cannot use that to fire up.
But that's what I said in the beginning: is people, technology, process. If you even put a label on a document that you cannot print it at all.
Yeah, they will.
If you take a picture with your cell phone, you have also a screenshot, right? And that's again a process. I worked for a company that are doing very sensitive R&D, and there in certain rooms you just not came in with a photo or a device that can take a photo, right?
Yeah, so, but we know that most of the breaches occur through errors or failures from following something. So you're right, of course, Nico. You can bypass everything. No, to come back, because an interesting point has been made around, what if you're traveling? What if I'm now going on holiday to the other side of the world and I have documents on my laptop, and especially for Alain, this remark, what am I then? Am I still GDPR, in line with GDPR? Am I becoming a processor somewhere outside of Europe and suddenly I am in breach? What can happen or what cannot happen? Am I still safe?
Well, I would like to. Are you not going back to? Sorry, but are you not going back to what Frédéric said about the trust? So you're not supposed to use a VPN in Luxembourg if you're abroad or outside of Europe or anywhere in the world to make your work. So it should be also in the policies that it's allowed or not, and using a VPN, because by default, by experience, I mean, if you connect on 4G and you have a Luxembourg provider, by default, you will be allowed to connect because you're not using a Wi-Fi. And in this case, it seems that you are seen like someone in Luxembourg, even if you are somewhere in the world. So I think that it might be just by the policy and the trust in people in this case.
Yeah,
sorry.
It's true, but what happens for the organization if somebody tries to do it and succeeds? Am I still aligned with what CNPD expects or not?
No, it's not what CNPD expects. It's quite GDPR, which is quite clear there. If you go to a third country, it will be considered as a data transfer to a third country. And so you have to fulfill some obligations regarding this data. Okay. So meaning that if you just use your laptop, no, you have personal data on it, you go to Dubai on the expo and you work from there. You are working from a third country, you don't fulfill the requirements to be compliant with working from a third country, this might be a legal problem.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks for both gentlemen for the clarification. I think David looked at it from a technical perspective, but I was also interested to get a view on the CNPD requirements, of course. Now, another issue that is burning in, at least for me, since the start of the pandemic. When we started the pandemic, the remote working was our backup system in many cases. The remote working was in case our building burned down or was closed for whatever reason, and we could revert back to a solution that allowed us to work. But
it was disaster recovery.
It was disaster recovery, but we are still in, let's say, part of the pandemic, and now the home working has become part of the production environment and not a disaster recovery protocol. What do we do if we don't have both available anymore? Because we cannot go to the building, it's not allowed to do working in the office because of the pandemic, and the remote working fails. Do we have other options?
In other words, so to speak, teleworking becomes sort of a new normal, having been the backup for years and years, now becomes the new normal, Well, what is the backup to the teleworking?
Good question.
As long as there's internet, we should be fine, right?
It's a bit funny, but we are thinking again to have some, how can I say that, some points of working,
Satellite
not only
offices,
in the center of Luxembourg, but in a few positions next to the border, for example, to ease our cross-border employees. And well, it's one part of the solution, but teleworking was exactly the disaster of business continuity plan. We use it. We feel it's okay. Lots of employees like that. We will continue working that way. But I don't know actually. But some other locations should be or would be created within Luxembourg, and for the other countries, that have no fiscal issues. It's much more. The way we are thinking about it is to add some smaller locations, smaller buildings, not only one in the headquarters.
Yeah, the satellite offices, we use the same approach, but now David and especially Catherine as well, you both come from the regulator world. Does my home working situation still count as my DRP or BCP plan for the regulator? Because that's another question. We can find a practical solution, but I see you're nodding no, so we are in trouble now.
I think no, but we see Catherine.
So maybe let me just point out one thing directly to Frédéric's comment, saying that that they're moving more towards having more smaller offices. I think this is something that I can also confirm that we have seen during the pandemic as well, especially with companies which weren't able to allow all of their staff to work from home directly at the beginning of the pandemic, because they simply didn't have the infrastructure in place for certain tasks. And so they were then splitting their employees, multiple offices, multiple disaster recovery sites, and even normal offices for those people that couldn't work from home. So, and I think this is also something that we should take into account in the future, is that this kind of BCP setup will most likely be a setup that will be a mix of which functions can maybe be working from home for a certain amount of time, and which functions really should be performed from office premises, because either you don't have the technical infrastructure, or you just need to make sure that you have a certain, let's call it central administration is the word that we use. Like, you have to still ensure that you're, even in the case of an issue, you have the decision-making powers and the staff in a central location to be able to work together. I mean, that was the entire basis for the companies in Luxembourg. And I think it's important and also fair to say that although we don't know how it's going to develop in the future with regards to, let's say, all the social and taxation issues for all the cross-border workers, because we're really in a specific situation here in the country compared to our neighboring countries, where they simply don't face these issues when they have lots of people working from home. They don't have to take that into account. But even from that point of view, having a large number of the workforce being outside of the country, once some of these regulations will be lifted, will still pose a problem, because it could be considered as setting up future companies, entities, branches, whatever, outside of Luxembourg. So we're actually moving the substance outside. So in the future, and this is the position that we're still taking, is that teleworking or home working can serve as part of a BCP plan, but generally, let's say outside of the pandemic situation, you should still be able to also make use of additional office premises to keep especially those decision making levels and decision making powers together.
Yeah, thank you for that. Do you have anything to add, David, or you?
Yeah, I would say that in fact, so what I did, the teleworking is changing a little bit the way that you address the DRP and BCP, because you need maybe less places available by BCP center. So as before, you need the DRP and of course the BCP or some places that you rent somewhere. And what is changing, in fact, that the number of places might change with the teleworking. But before, it was a problem of not allowing to have someone with the teleworking on production. Now it has changed, but now the taxation and the economic context or legal context has changed also, which means that you are back to the same situation. If you allow someone to work and to make teleworking 1 or 2 days, depending on the country he's coming from, he will use all the amount of days, and when at the end of the year you have a disaster, he doesn't have any days available anymore. So in this case, you still need to have a BCP center. And by the way, it might be also interesting to see who has to come to the institution or to the bank to work, like maybe the trading side on the trading room, because they have specific equipment, this kind of thing. And then, of course, this cannot be teleworked in any time. So in this case, you still need some premises for the BCP, I think. So it's not a real game changer, the teleworking. At least I would not bet on it, because if you have all your capital of days used during the year and you have an incident at the end, you don't have days anymore available for your people.
Yeah. Well, but I would say who had imagined 2 years ago that they won't be that all the neighbor countries will agree on I would say 220 days outside Luxembourg. No one here in the panel, absolutely no one. So just to say that when there is a crisis, when there is something really strong, Luxembourg has always been able to find solutions, and in that part, if a big or smaller bank or financial institution has a big problem, I'm sure that together with neighbor countries, Luxembourg will find the solutions so that we will continue, even if there are some problems with tax regulations or whatever, or 10 days more than the 34 days allowed for Belgium or French guys. Well, the most important thing is that Luxembourg will stay a strong financial place, and I'm pretty sure that we'll find solutions. Yeah,
I won't bet on this.
Yeah.
I won't bet on this, and I would say maybe in 2 years, 3 years, yes, when it's globally done. Otherwise, there is also the problem of the nationality of the bank. Of course, for the nationality of the bank, which is a subsidiary from the other country, it will work immediately. But the other countries won't accept them. So I won't bet on this. At the risk appetite, I won't take it.
Yeah, but yeah. Well,
I think both remarks are fair. I think, of course, Frederick looks at it from the institution he works, and they might be a bit different than the experience David has, and that's fair enough. I tend to agree with David here, and of course there are exceptions like the institution you work for, Frederick, but I tend to agree with David. I wouldn't bet too much on it, because it might for some work and none for others not.
Yeah, and to add something about the substance of the institution, well, actually the substance stay in Luxembourg, even if 24 or 50% of the employees work from outside. The substance of the bank here for us stay in Luxembourg. Yeah, really. So it's not a point from us, I would say. But what we, of course, it could be used to do so. If people are or organizations are not fair, I would say a big teleworking could be used to try to put the substance abroad, but working 50% of the employees working from abroad doesn't mean that the substance of a Luxembourg bank goes abroad.
That's true. But in case it will be an issue for the taxation.
Yeah.
So then it will cost a lot to the bank.
We will find solutions. But yeah.
David, I'm with you, but let me toss another big stone into the pond, and let's not go into that discussion because we have no tax. I'm a lawyer, but okay, let's forget about that. But no tax lawyer around, so let's not dive too much into that. My honest, very personal opinion about all that is that those tax regulations on XYZ days you're allowed to spend in a other country than the country you're working in normally, etc., etc., etc. Those regulations too will have to adapt to a new normal in the framework of freedom of establishment, freedom of labor, etc., etc. It's the pandemic which told us that there will be a new normal on the side of teleworking, and it's going to be, yes, a question of political influence. There's going to be a lot of discussions back and forth, but to me, this issue will look completely different in 5 to 10 years from now. Because it will be a new normal.
Yes. Yeah. No, 5 to 10 years, I agree with you, but not in the next 2 or 3 years.
No. I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't as well.
No, there are other issues in the home working sphere, and I think, Frederick, you already mentioned it. For the moment, the substance is still in Luxembourg, but at the same time that we moved to home working, there was also definitely an acceleration on what we call digital transformation and the move to the cloud. And I'm now looking at Nico. I'm not against cloud. I think it can bring a lot of advantages. But what I'm afraid of is that we are moving substances away, which we had within the borders now. But not only that, in many organizations, we are putting all our IT assets or eggs into one basket, and that can be Microsoft or Amazon or Google or Alibaba, it doesn't matter. Now, how is Microsoft reacting on that? Because of course I know you have a data center in Europe, but you also had some outages. How are you going to cope with that in the future? And how is the regulator, and we can look at that afterwards, or an institution looking at that for the moment?
Well, the trend that we see on the market is definitely multi-cloud. So indeed, eggs in a basket, that's a question coming up all the time. So we expect that companies will go, spread their workloads across multi-clouds. That can be AWS, that can be Microsoft, that can be even on-premise or whatever private cloud. But I think for us it's important from a security vision that we have that single pane of glass. So that's why you see that our platform, our security platform, it typically has a vision already today on that multi-cloud. So if customers choosing to put their data somewhere else, we will work on it and we will protect it. What was your other question regarding outages?
Of course, outages, and of course, if I put it today in multi-cloud, if Google fails, in many cases, the other GAFA members fail as well. We've seen that in the past, so no offense to any of you. You're so interconnected, and internet is so controlled by a few today that is the reality. But especially for the regulators, and I would also like to hear the view, of course, of Frederick and CNPD. Is multi-cloud the way to go for any institution or for the regulator in order to keep things rolling when something goes wrong?
So first of all, I think we should also briefly mention that with regards to the whole cloud movement in Luxembourg, we have been very much at the forefront on some of the analysis and actually looking into this. Which was never something that we actually stopped. When the cloud movement started, in the beginning, some of our other colleagues' countries, neighboring countries, were looking into the cloud as well. And I think we were one of the first to actually issue a circular on cloud computing as well and start really discussing in depth with all the different big cloud providers on what we think we would like to have as comforting reassurances that this move to the cloud will be good and positive for the entities. So I think cloud is a really good solution also for a lot of very small market players as well as the big ones, because in some cases we have seen that being some smaller companies, their IT infrastructure might be less secured if they have to do it on their own than they could have potentially in the cloud. Now, at the same time, these small entities also need to be able to understand what they're actually doing moving to the cloud and which risks they're taking if they're going with one cloud service provider or a multi-provider environment. And we do see now as well that this move towards multi-cloud, the portability, the hybrid cloud solutions are definitely coming into place. We certainly see these as well for larger players in the market. We're studying them still, just as the players are studying them as well. There is the first sort of initiatives around the joint audits for the different cloud platforms. Everybody is doing their own evaluations, and I think definitely if we're looking at large players or even medium-sized players going like full cloud, this solutions of putting in place a multi-cloud strategy is definitely a step in the right direction. Having said that, there is still a certain let's say risk, because we also all know that, as you already said, all these cloud providers are also very much interconnected. We're still going over the internet, etc. But let me put the question or the comment the other way around. If the entire internet fails and all these cloud service providers fail at the same time, are we really going to be able to execute our payments or do our banking transactions here in Luxembourg anyway? Because then I think we have a much bigger problem that will lead to fail the entire, let's say, lead to a much larger collapse than these providers. So
Yeah,
let me put it this way.
You're most probably right, yes. Then we have another issue.
Let me catch that one up. We had a keynote this afternoon. I believe it was from Tom Schepers from Google Cloud, and whom I asked whether he would see a movement eventually from the regulatory side towards constraining or compelling a number of industries to go multi-cloud. It could be industries related, for example, to critical infrastructures in the broadest sense of the word, health sector, energy, telecoms, banking, etc., etc. And Tom's input on that one was that apparently such a regulation already exists in the UK, but there is, at least to my knowledge, nothing comparable in the rest of Europe. But would you or could you anticipate something like that coming, that there would be a constraint to go multi-cloud?
Maybe I can try to sell my idea about that, about what I see. So this is absolutely not a GDPR issue, but I think we can see that there is a push in Europe to raise technology, raise cloud system to be more independent from a European point of view than from other companies. The thing is that when you are going to use companies which are not located in Europe or which have premises outside of Europe, there may be some more legal issue that you are going to face. It will not going to be to block the fact of being do that, but you have more legal risks. And we can already see it today with the Schrems II judgment. Now, today we want to process data that are located in a cloud provider in America. Well, it's quite difficult to do it from a legal point of view to comply with it. You have the problematic with the Cloud Act, which also gives a potential legal issue. So meaning that companies that are here, US companies that are here, and they have data about you, that they could be obliged to give those data to the US. And these are some legal risks in that context.
Yeah. Okay.
If I would say I can say something, I'd say that I don't see how a regulator, at least like CSSF or European one, could ask for going to hybrid or to multi-cloud by default. Why? Because it's technologically driven. So it means that you have different risks. So, and it's not up to the regulator to define if this risk can be accepted or taken by a bank. So the risk profile of the bank would say, I want to have more or different risk going to the multi-cloud, because the multi-cloud is also more technological issues. You need to be sure that you can switch from one cloud to another one, or you can use both clouds at the same time. And everything is about also the complexity of rerouting, about the network, and so on. So it's not something which is easy. And even if you have a multi-cloud, it means that you have the tools to do it. And these tools are increasing a specific kind of risk about bugs in these tools as such. So you cannot push as a regulator, I think, so it's my opinion, as a regulator, how can you push someone to go to take a specific risk if the bank, for example, decide to know, I want to keep a center on my side, just a backup or something which is, at least in the worst case, being able to issue the position like too big to fail, as we had in 2008, and to be sure that at least for the regulator and for my own possibilities, I know what are the position, what are the statement of account, and so on. And in this case, multi-cloud might not be, it increases, and it's a different kind of risk. And the regulator cannot say, I push you to take this kind of risk. I'm not sure it's the way they are doing.
Yeah, it's a valid point, I think. Yeah, we shouldn't mix too much into technology when we make regulations, and it's up to everyone to decide, of course. I like all of the answers that I hear, especially that Microsoft say we aim for multi-cloud as well. It shows up that the world is open to that. Now, of course, there is still a debate about interoperability between those. I think Alain mentioned a critical point, Schrems 2, because I hear a lot of rumors on the market that you cannot go to the cloud because of due to Schrems 2. So maybe we can clarify that if it's true or not, or get it out of the world.
And perhaps from a regulator point of view or from an economic point of view, at one day or another, European Union will have to say, just build a cloud, a European cloud, so that we will be able to go on with our economic growth, actually. Because this is the point. This is really the point. And the regulator, well, even if I'm not, I will have to comply with that. The regulator could say, well, your infrastructure should be based in Europe if you want to be a European bank or European or whatever, because of course there will be issues with US, and we see a Schrem 2, sorry, but the same for Chinese or whatever. We don't have a clue what will be the world in 5 years, and actually, and it's a bit. Beside our discussion, but we have also to pay attention to that as European, to be sure that we will be able to work in a safe environment in 5 years or 10 years or whatever, and it's the responsibility of all of us, actually.
Yeah. Alain, just to come back on Schrems 2, can I use the European location of Microsoft and still be okay, or do I have a Schrems 2 issue?
No, if you are using a European location, you have no Schrems 2 issue. Schrems 2 issue is only if you are processing or transferring data to a third country. And a third country is a country which has, let's say, which is not under GDPR and which has no adequacy decision under the European Commission to have the same level of protection as GDPR. But this question raised mostly with the US because it's a big, they provide a lot of services. And of course, today, if you want to transfer data to the US, from a legal point of view, it's quite complex because due to Schrems 2, you have to ensure that you secure your data such a way that organizations like NSA or others are not able to get those data or to use those data. That's what's behind Schrems 2, and that's what makes it difficult
And if data centers are, for example, in Ireland or in Europe, but it's the corporate is a US corporate, don't we have any issue?
Well, there is a little one. You don't have as much easy
very diplomatic. Very diplomatic. We will recommend you for the diplomatic service in Ireland of Luxembourg. Very diplomatic.
No, the issue what I'm talking about, but I'm
again
not
in the
so
press
expert
on your Irish colleagues having big trouble vis-a-vis their European colleagues because of Facebook, among others. So.
No, but it is not Irish. You could
or whatever.
Yeah. In Luxembourg, if you use the cloud in Luxembourg, it's exactly the same problematic. The thing is the Cloud Act. If you use the US company, which a company here may be forced to give data directly to the US. That's a small issue that you have in that situation. But it's not the same as the Schrems do issue.
No, yeah, I wanted to clarify that because we hear a lot of rumors in the market today, and thank you for that, Alain, because we get customer requests as well. I want to go to a European location of whatever provider, Microsoft, Google, or AWS, but I cannot because I hear it's not allowed. You clarified that, so that's very good. I think that was very clear. And it's also important because on our journey in the teleworking that we will face in the future, this will definitely pop up, of course. Any questions from the audience or remarks?
I just have one remark which goes, well, almost back ages because it's a remark relating to what we discussed very early on. One of our auditors says the problem with laptop is not new. Remember, that's the discussion which we had, the laptop belonging to the company and how you make sure that you get control over the instrument either while your employee is disgruntled or because you fire him, whatever. There have been mobile workers, salespeople, etc. before the pandemic as well. Why is it an issue now? And then the other remark of that same member of the audience is the company should be able to remotely wipe the laptop whenever they want. Surely the physical hardware is not important. That's very true, obviously, that the physical hardware is not important. So any thoughts, any reactions from you about that?
Maybe one, because I was thinking and asking maybe also Koen what we think about. Wiping, when you do this, you lose also the trace if you want to make forensic. And my question will be, because what I see also is a difference between what was said about mobile device management. It's a different thing to manage laptops than managing an iPhone or an iPad or any Android, I don't know. Why? Because you have the policy, when people are pushing laptop without any MDM, in fact, they are using only the remote like Citrix, something like this, which means that nothing is on the PC. Yeah. And you just try to be sure that nobody can use the data that you see on the screen. So I think it's completely different of having a laptop where you have a remote access without only the screen. I mean, you just use the screen of the remote PC on the institution side. And but my question to Koen maybe also is, if you wipe it, are you not losing forensics?
Of course, in a laptop, I wouldn't recommend it to wipe it unless there is a true emergency, and we need to define that process. I think Nico mentioned already that these processes are quite important. Now, to come back to the remark on a mobile device, you're absolutely right, David. The issue is that most policies on a mobile device are that if you try 10 times the wrong pin, it will wipe itself. So if you have a disgruntled employee who's smart enough, he will wipe his own phone just by abusing that policy, which he or she cannot always buy on a laptop because you can block certain things. Of course, if they're smart enough, they still can. Yeah, wiping a device remotely, you need to do that extremely carefully, because you will lose a lot of information. Unless you use the setup you mentioned, David, then it's safe to do. If there's nothing on it and it's just a device to hop onto a Citrix or a remote session, I think then it's safe to wipe it because you have all the access logs on the other side. But we need to be careful with that. Yeah, absolutely right.
Any other thoughts about that, madam, gentlemen? Well, if not, then let me thank you for a tentaculous almost discussion which we had, because we started with teleworking, we ended up in the middle of the cloud or the clouds with capital C and small c, etc. Thank you again, Catherine. Thank you, Frederick. Thank you, Nico. Thank you, Alain. Sorry. Thank you, Alain. Thank you, David, for having been with us. Thank you for an exciting hour of debate and discussion. Hopefully next time, not in the new normal, but in the old normal, that is face-to-face and physically. So have a good evening, have a great night, and hopefully see you back soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.